Hello and welcome to the National Security Conversation. Kashmir has been on the boil for some time now. There is a new insurgency in Kashmir. We often hear that Kashmir is on its way back to the bad old days of 1990s. How accurate is that? Let me give you some data for perspective. The latest annual report of the Ministry of Home Affairs reports that since the advent of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir in 1990, a total of 13,976 civilians and 5,123 security personnel have lost their lives till December 31st, 2017. In fact, in the year 2013, there were 170 incidents, terrorist-related incidents in Jammu and Kashmir, and it went up to 342 in the year 2017. 15 civilians were killed in 2013. It went up to 40 in the year 2017. And in the year 2013, you had 16 young boys taking up arms against the Indian state in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which went up to 126 in the year 2017. Are there similarities between the insurgency and militancy in Kashmir today with what happened in the late 1980s and early 1990s? To discuss this, I have with me in the studio Dr. Manoj Joshi. Dr. Joshi is a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and is a senior defense journalist. He is also author of The Lost Rebellion Kashmir in the 1990s. This is a new edition of his 1998 book. If you want to know more about the origins of the Kashmir insurgency and how it panned out in the 1990s, this is the book to read. I would say this is a canonical text on the Jammu and Kashmir issue. Welcome to the National Security Conversation, Dr. Joshi. Dr. Joshi, if I may begin with you, what made you come out with this slightly revised edition of your book? Do you think the ongoing troubles in Jammu and Kashmir demand that we take a re-look at what happened in the 1980s and 1990s?
Absolutely. Meaning, I think the deteriorating situation from approximately 2013, 2014, definitely I felt that, and I got some queries about my old book. It had gone out of print, and so I requested Penguin Books that whether they were interested in bringing out a new edition. So they wanted an update. But I told them, I said, it's impossible to update 20 years down the line. And what I can do is I'll write an additional chapter. So I've written an aftermath chapter in this, which covers the period approximately 2000 to 2018. So it's a kind of an overview of that. But otherwise, the original book is here in totality, without any changes.
You know, one of the things that struck me about the book is that we often speak of Kashmir in a very ahistorical manner. I think this sort of puts on the table the history of the Kashmir insurgency as it sort of played out in Jammu and Kashmir. You think there's a need to look at history in a more objective manner, the way that you have done in this book? You talk about, say, for example, the special political history of Kashmir. You do talk about the rigged elections in Jammu and Kashmir, the bungling of the Indian state, for example. Today, if you ask people who is Syed Salahuddin, people may not even know who that person is. All of this has a certain history and a certain context. Do you think, therefore, it is a good thing to revisit history and sort of re-educate the public as it was to what the Kashmir insurgency is all about?
Definitely. I think, the old phrase which says that those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. And because there are some lessons. I'm not saying that history lessons are absolute.
Right.
But there are some lessons, and definitely having a grasp. And many of the interesting thing is that many of the actors who figure in this book are still around.
That's right.
Okay. Syed Salahuddin, he's very much around. Syed Ali Shah Geelani, the young Mirwais, who's now grown up, Yasin Malik, Shabbir Shah. Till recently, Mr. Vora was still the governor of Kashmir. He has been a defense secretary, home secretary. He was involved with Kashmir right from the 1990s. So many of the characters are still there. So, and they're still playing a role.
Who is Syed Salahuddin, and what is so important about him?
About Salahuddin. Well, Salahuddin, see, he's a Jamaat Islami cadre, And Jamaat Islamic cadre, he contested in the 1987 elections and he lost. And thereafter, when the radical faction of the Jamaat Islami decided that they will participate in the militancy, after they saw the JKLF militancy succeed, the Jamaat Islami jumped into the conflict and encouraged by Pakistan. The Pakistanis wanted an organization which was openly wanted merger with Pakistan. So the Jamaat Islami obliged. Jamaat Islami cadres went across, they were trained, and there was another couple of Ashraf Dar, and then there was Maqbool Ilahi. Both these leaders were killed, and then Sayyid Salahuddin became the leader of the Hizbul Mujahideen. Now the army was kind of looking for him. His problem is that he's not really very fit. He's a kind of a bulky kind of a guy, and moving around it's not easy. So the militants had to organize a pony for him when he had to move in those parts. So I think at some point they decided it was more prudent that he go across to the other side. So he went across to the other side, and that's where he's been all this while. And so there he has, of course, headed the Hizbul Mujahideen, and he's also been the head of the United Jihad Council.
There was some talk some time ago about him wanting to come back to India. The Indian side wanted to sort of rehabilitate him in the political scheme of things. Do you think that is an accurate way of looking at it, or?
Yeah, meaning everything is. You see, the point is everything is possible. And you know, during the Vajpayee years, there was an attempt at a ceasefire. His number 2 was involved, right? But the Pakistanis sabotaged it, systematically sabotaged it. The ceasefire didn't quite work out, and but from the initial indication, it was clear to me that this is something which actually had the blessings of Salahuddin. But once the Pakistanis got to know of it, you know, they cracked down on him, and so he suddenly said, no more ceasefire, and he let down his own deputy, and the people here who had actually stuck their necks out, they got into trouble, and eventually they were killed by the Pakistanis. So definitely he has an interest. If he can work out some kind of an honorable way of getting back, he would love to get back. But I don't think the Pakistanis are going to let him go.
That's also part of the problem. Dr. Joshi, tell us about the origins of the Kashmir insurgency, the way you recall those origins in this book.
You see, there is one kind of long history which relates to accession and all that, and then the feeling. Yeah, so I'm saying the feeling in Kashmir that, you know, that the rigged elections, the dominance of the Abdullahs. So there was frustration in the 80s in the valley. Some of these were manifested when, you know, the famous cricket match episode took place. Then Sheikh Saab died. Then Farooq took over. Farooq, very brilliant man in his own way, but he's also a bit of a maverick. And initially he refused to do a deal with the. He actually became. He actually assumed the leadership of the All India opposition, meaning he became part of that Gathbandhan in those days. You see, and the union government at the center, headed by the Congress, struck back at him by organizing a coup, and his brother-in-law was made chief minister, and he was out. And so there was a lot of turmoil in Kashmir, and I think the people were watching this. And then after this, when Farooq realized he had no alternative, he actually joined up with with Congress, and they fought the election together in '87. So there was a lot of disgust at these kind of things happening in the valley amongst the young people. Simultaneously, what was happening was that you had what is happening in Afghanistan, that, you know, if you're militant, you fight, and you can overthrow tyranny, and that kind of propaganda was also going on. JKLF, Amanullah Khan, and the JKLF now got active, Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front. Amanullah Khan came from UK. He took over the charge of the JKLF. The Pakistanis initially tried to get the Jamaat Islami to train them and to use them to spark the insurgency. The Jamaat refused. Jamaat said, you know, they were not particularly keen. Maulana Sadruddin, he visited Pakistan, and they refused. But then the JKLF was said, yes, sure, we'll. So they took up the thing. There were bomb blasts. There were people being trained, young men coming going across the LOC, coming back trained with AK-47s. And then there was the problem was that there was this coincidence of the collapse, I would say, or political crisis in India. 89, the Congress party lost. A weak coalition headed by VP Singh took over. The man, VP Singh, was used to grandstanding, and one of his grandstanding style was he appointed a Muslim Kashmiri as the Union Home Minister, thinking that he'll be able to satisfy Kashmiri opinion and kill several birds with one stone. They have a Muslim Kashmiri Home Minister. Mufti Muhammad Saeed was appointed. And then what happened was that the JKLF guys kidnapped his daughter, Rubaya. She was working in the hospital there. And they said that unless you free so many of our compatriots, we won't let her go. And then so this crisis started building. You know, the valley is a small place, Srinagar is a small place in some ways. And actually what was happening was that the pressure was building against the JKLF because they had kidnapped a woman. But because she was the Home Minister's daughter in New Delhi, the pressure was building up against Farooq, saying, you better release this thing. We have no choice. Minister's daughter has been this thing. Farooq was refusing. To his credit, he refused until he was virtually ordered by VP Singh that you release Rubia. Right. JKLF people were released. Rubia was released. So there was jubilation in the JKLF. First time they had defeated the mighty Indian state, that's right, you know, in a head-to-head encounter. And that kind of, there was a kind of upsurge, you know, in Srinagar, a lot of support for the militancy. Then the government in panic, they replaced the governor. Right. They got Jagmohan. They said, again, a typical symbolic thing of VP Singh. He said, I'll get a hardline governor, the person who had a reputation as hardline, Jagmohan. So Jagmohan was sent. Now Jagmohan, this is early January, and Jagmohan was sent, and he was going to Srinagar. The weather was bad, so he landed in Jammu. In the meantime, in Srinagar, there was an Inspector General of Police called Joginder Singh. Now, Joginder Singh is the famous tiger Joginder Singh, who became head of CBI, a bit of a fool, you know. And so when they realized that the new governor is coming, he'll, you know, sort of question us, he will scold us. So they said, we must crack down. So they instituted a massive crackdown in Batmalu and those areas. And when that crackdown happened, done with great brutality, the whole place exploded.
Just to go back a bit, would you say that the Pakistani interference in Jammu and Kashmir in the 80s preceded the bungling by New Delhi, political bungling by New Delhi in Kashmir? Or is it the other way around?
No. See, the Pakistani factor is that once the Pakistanis found a formula in Afghanistan, right, weapons, training, so they understood this whole business. So now for Pakistan, there's only one obsession, which is Kashmir. So the head of the ISI, General Akhtar Abdul Rahman, said, Ab jo hai, now we will use this experience for Kashmir. So from 84 itself, planning had begun.
But from 84 onwards, you had troubles in the valley.
You had troubles in the valley. So there would be low-level Pakistani involvement. But Pakistan never thought that the uprising will. They had planned that the uprising would take place somewhere down in 92 or something like that. Right. Okay. You see, so actually events overtook them their planning. They were thinking systematically they'll train more and more young men, and then at an appropriate time they will launch the uprising. But what happened was these other developments took place. So Pakistan is very much involved right from the outset. After all, they gave, Amanullah came and they gave shelter, and they were the people who were backing the training, and all that was done, couldn't have been done without the approval of the ISI.
Well, you know, the withdrawal of Soviet Union from Afghanistan and the sort of the end of the Mujahideen war in Afghanistan, as it were, how much did that influence the insurgency in Kashmir? Because you don't seem to go so much into that detail, as it were, in the book.
I don't think there was a direct influence.
Okay.
Now, what would happen is that some of these JKLF, or not JKLF, was more this thing, Hizbul Mujahideen leaders, they would claim that this guy is actually trained in Afghanistan, he fought in the Afghan jihad, but that was a bit of propaganda. not too many Kashmiri.
So you are saying that the Pakistani ISI did not shift some of those mujahideen who were fighting in Afghanistan to the Kashmir?
No. Wait. Now that I'm talking of now up to about 89.
That's right.
You see, in 90, when the withdrawal actually took place, at one point in time, they did send in a couple of Afghans. There was an Afghan group came across.
Not too many. Not too many.
Not too many, but a group came across and they were located in Sopore and they were involved in the fighting and they were, they created a lot of issues for us. But the Afghans got wiped out pretty soon. Or many of them got wiped out and the others went back. And they realized that the situation here was different. You see, in the case of Afghanistan, the Afghans and the Soviets could never actually block the border. The Durand Line border, they could never actually this thing. But here you will have to come across a lethal Indian Army cordon in the line of control. Okay? You could never breach that. I mean, you could infiltrate around it, but but out there it was virtually open, and because it was open, you could also send in standoff weapons, bigger weapons, the kind of small mortars and cannons and that kind of stuff, and much more material would get through.
Would you say the situation is repeating somewhat today, because you're looking at a Western drawdown from Afghanistan today? You're looking at the Pakistani side feeling triumphalist. They think that they've sort of weighted the Americans out from Afghanistan, and you have a rising insurgency in Kashmir. So the geopolitical.
I don't think that again. I don't think. See, the Afghans, as I said, have been tried as fighters and they have not done too well in Kashmir. Okay, but the value of Afghanistan is different today. The value of Afghanistan for Pakistan is it's a place where you can train people with plausible deniability. So you establish. So the first training camps of the Lashkar-e-Taiba were actually established in Kunar province of Afghanistan, which had already been liberated by the Mujahideen. So some Mujahideen areas, they established these camps for the Lashkar-e-Taiba. You see, now the Lashkar-e-Taiba had nothing to do with the Afghan jihad. They used to claim that we are fighting Afghan jihad. They had exclusively to do with Kashmir. They were an exclusive ISI group created to fight in Kashmir, but they were trained in Kunar province. The camp was in Kunar province. Right. And the reason was plausible deniability, because the Americans in, I think it was 92, came very close to declaring them a state sponsor of terrorism. Jim Baker came down to the Secretary of State Jim Baker came down, Bush 1 administration, and he read out the Riot Act to the Pakistanis and said that you will be declared the state sponsors of terrorism. Then, of course, they were lucky because Bush lost the election. You see, Bush lost the election, so that threat went away. But otherwise, so what they had done is that the camps were in Kunar province. And then don't forget, when the Americans bombed, when the cruise missiles were sent for Osama's camp, the camp that was struck next to it was a Harkatul Mujahideen camp, exclusively for Kashmiris. So the danger today, to answer your question, is that if the Afghan government is not able to control Afghan territory, it can once again play that role that the Pakistanis will say, we have no training camps here, you can come and check in Pakistan, but the training camps will be across the border in Afghanistan.
But more importantly, I thought there is a symbolic utility to what is happening in Afghanistan. I mean, the boys who are fighting the Indian state in Kashmir can look at Afghanistan and say, hey, here is the superpower that has been defeated. The Americans.
I don't think that works, because they haven't been too successful in Kashmir. All the Afghan fighters and all that.
No, it's not about the fighters coming to Kashmir. It is about the boys looking at what is happening in Afghanistan, taking inspiration.
I don't think that the Kashmiri struggle can never reach that level. You see, the Taliban are fighting virtually. They're a much more sophisticated and higher level insurgent group. Using much more. Yesterday they've claimed they've knocked out a B-52.
Interesting.
Yes. So
this is never going to reach that.
So they must be having surface-to-air missiles, whereas the Pakistanis have strictly controlled the weapon supplies and nowadays the weapon supplies have also become very difficult. See, you were earlier speaking of the young people joining the insurgency. Many of them are snatching weapons. Their training is local. They don't go across. And they don't go across because the Indian Army cordon has become progressively tighter.
When you look at the rising insurgency today, and I sort of gave out those data points earlier on, what do you think some of the major differences between the insurgency in the 1990s and say today, since 2016, for example?
Well, one of the major differences is that Pakistan doesn't play that much of a role. But as I told you, that Pakistan is not able to provide, the young guys are not going across. Whatever, they don't get much training. They become militants, they last a couple of months and they are killed.
What was the case in the 90s?
They don't go, in that case, invariably 30, 40 of them would go across. They would be trained for 2-3 months, use AK-47, this thing, they would be given weapons, ammunition, and then they would come infiltrate back, you see, and then participate. Whereas today, it's more of even more primary stage of insurgency, where sometimes there have been instances of gun snatching or policemen running away with their guns and joining the insurgency. That's, as I told you, because of the cordon is much tighter. In those days, the intelligence is much tighter. Intelligence had collapsed in 1990. Today, intelligence hasn't collapsed. It's very much there, and many of these guys that's why I said they get killed very fast. They may become insurgents, but they don't last out too long.
In fact, in the book you mentioned that there were lawless zones in Kashmir in the early 1990s. That's not the case anymore.
No longer the case anymore.
What is the Pakistani role today in Kashmir, in your estimation?
I think it's a much more low-key role, in the sense they probably have agents supplying money. To the extent they can, they try to infiltrate people across. Their agents, so they are preoccupied with that. Some weapons I think they might manage to send through, but nowhere near the scale that was coming through. As I, in the sense, in my book, I have I have listed the kind of captures and things like that, and it's an astonishing it's an astonishing this thing that arms recovered. You have something like till July 98, 91, Pika, AK series guns, 20,000.
20,000.
Yes. Okay. So in 1990, 1,300 AK-47s were 1,300 AK-47s were captured.
And today there are no guns available in the valley.
See,
so
these are just captured. Okay. In 1992, when the things were peaking, 3,775 AK-47s were captured.
That's a big deal.
So these are huge figures,
Here is a different question, which is you also talk about some of the counterinsurgency strategies adopted by the government of India in the 1990s. What were some of those counterinsurgency?
Well, the government of India actually bungled into them. There were no counterinsurgency strategies, So what they did was, they looked at it as a kind of a law and order operation. Okay, law and order situation. What do we do? Panic. So they got in the BSF, they got in the CRPF, and they said, okay, now we have to recover the lost areas. So they made the BSF pickets in the middle of Lal Chowk, in the heartland, this thing, all with guns. All the BSF guys were sent, and they were terrified because they had no training. They had never before been involved in this kind of stuff. And so there was an Inspector General of Police called Ashok Patel. He has passed away now. So he innovated. So he created a G group. So with captured militants, they turned them around, and they used them as informants. And they developed rudimentary intelligence infrastructure, which was created, you see. And then over time, the Jammu and Kashmir police, which had also collapsed, again rose. So your intelligence became even better. So what they did was, in the border area, the LOC was looked after by the army, the various this thing. In the hinterland, various army units participated in orthodox counterinsurgency, which was what they had learnt in Nagaland and other places, dominating a village. The whole place was divided into a grid. There'd be QRTs, and the QRTs would check, and nakas, and this thing. In the urban areas, it was classic counterinsurgency in the sense you got informants, you turned them around to the extent that you could, and then you captured guys, tortured them, got another set of people, you see. So it was, and then the intelligence guys would pay off some people, buy information, get information. So they kind of stumbled. There was no kind of no hard and fast policy as far as counterinsurgency is concerned. Then the army at one point decided that, look, why don't we raise this Rashtriya Rifles? So the hinterland part of it, so that the orthodox army units are not involved in counterinsurgency, because we must keep them for deterring Pakistan. So they created this Rashtriya Rifles was created.
Yeah. No, one question about the role of religion. Do you think the struggle in the 1990s was more political in nature than, say, it is today? Today, the influence of religion has become a lot more increased in many ways today. Or do you not agree with that?
No, you see, the thing is that first of all, it's a well-known thing that in Islamic areas where there's a majority of Muslims, politics and religion often intertwine. It's very difficult to separate the two. There's no secularism in the sense that we know it. But it is a fact that the JKLF viewed itself as a secular entity, and that's why they called themselves Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front. But within them also there were Islamists. So Islamic stream was very much there. So then the Hizbul Mujahideen...
has it increased over the years?
It has.
Looking at what
now it has, because the JKLF is no longer there.
Yeah,
it's no longer there. And one of the things that the people like the Lashkar-e-Taiba did, because, and Jammu and Kashmir, separate from all this, there has also been the rise of the Ahle Hadith. The Ahle Hadith sect has become very important in Jammu and Kashmir. So that old kind of syncretic Islam is kind of dying away. And the Ahle Hadith has become more important, and the Ahle Hadith basically says that, we must go only by the Quran and the Hadith. That's it. There is no local tradition, no local this thing. So that kind of Islam is going away. So you have this purist Islamist tendency, but I would hesitate to call Ahle Hadith itself a militant group. It's not. Meaning there are militant groups which like Lashkar-e-Taiba, which are Ahle Hadith, but even someone like Maulana Azad was Ahle Hadith. See? So you may be an individual Ahle Hadith, but that doesn't mean that you're a militant.
But the youngsters in Kashmir are a lot more influenced by religion today than, say, in the 90s.
But that is, as I said, I think it's always there, in the sense that, as I said, in countries, Islam is something where Islam and politics is very difficult to separate.
One crucial problem again is about the ability of the dissident leadership to control the uprising on the struggle or the agitation, as it were. In the book you talk about the role played by the dissident leadership in the 1990s. Today there is no dissident leadership worth the name. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
You mean the Hurriyat?
The Hurriyat and the Mirwais and
you see, this is very interesting, because when the whole thing collapsed in 1990, the government of India, as I told you, didn't know what to do. So they were flailing around for a policy. They didn't know who to talk to. Assembly had been dissolved. Politicians were being targeted, killed, the orthodox politicians. And so actually, it was in the interests of the government to create the Hurriyat. And I think the government did play a role in creating the Hurriyat. Today they might deny it, but they did play a role, because they said at least we can talk to these guys.
So is it a good strategy to go after the same Hurriyat today?
No, it's not. I think it's just, basically the point is, as long as the guy is not wielding the gun, why do you want to go after him? Meaning, because that guy you can make a deal with, you see, but the guy with the gun you got to shoot.
That's right.
You see, so the point is that to an extent, so the strategy was in '93 that let's get there was no election could take place. There were no elections going on. Farooq Abdullah was sitting on the sidelines. There was no normal politics had vanished. So you only had gunmen around. So it was a deliberate strategy of the Indian state to encourage non-gunmen separatists.
Dr. Joshi, the Indian state and the people of Kashmir have gone through a very painful journey through the 1990s. Have we learned our lessons as a country in sort of dealing with insurgencies, in dealing with this kind of uprising in the valley or in the northeast for that matter?
No, I don't think so, because I think people have forgotten. I mean, say in my book, I describe the harsh torture and the harsh regime, the people killed, meaning a huge multiple tragedies all around, when people get killed, whether they are security personnel or whether they are civilians or whether they are militants. Torture was prevalent all over the place. So now, in those circumstances, people don't realize it, and they don't realize that some of what you see in Kashmir is a consequence of that. There are scars, there's scar tissue, and you're not recognizing that there has been a problem or there is a problem. It's not something which, if you have been through it or if your relatives have been through it, you're not going to forget it that easily.
So as a state, we should have learned our lessons and should have dealt with Kashmir more carefully and more wisely.
Absolutely, you have to. There is if your own state, Kashmir is a state of the Republic of India, your own people. So if you treat them ill, you're only shooting yourself in the foot. Meaning hearts and minds is serious strategy when it comes. Everyone who deals with counterinsurgency will tell you, either you destroy the whole thing. There are only two strategies. One is that you obliterate everything, kill everyone, or you adopt a strategy adopt a counterinsurgency strategy which upholds the rule of law. You see, uphold the rule of law. I'm being very, very this thing, and slowly and systematically regains the trust of the people.
The book was written in the late 1990s. It doesn't talk about what can be done now, what next, what in your opinion can be done now at this point of time to sort of contain the insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir.
Well, I still think that the way of dealing with the insurgency needs to be... see, Kashmir has two elements in it. One is the Pakistani element, because there is a dispute which needs to be, which is on the books of the international community. There is a dispute which must be worked out. Second is the internal this thing. Both have to be resolved, and I would urge that both should be resolved simultaneously. There should be no, if it's done simultaneously, it's the best. The international community, by and large, accepts today the sanctity of the line of control. Okay. I would broadly argue that Indian grand strategy was also that let's finish off the border at the line of actual control. We don't really... Does the state want so many more million Muslims in the Jammu and Kashmir? I don't think so. I mean, if you ask an average Indian, do you want... it's true, meaning do you want 3 million more Muslims in the population? The Kashmir will become even more Islamist. I'm being very blunt out here. So either you settle at the LOC, and I think the LOC broadly marks out the areas of the state which India can control reasonably. So working out something. So we tried in Simla.
Yeah, we talk about that.
Yeah, we tried in Simla. The Musharraf 5-point formula was also, Manmohan Singh came pretty close. He said, basically, I'm not going to change borders, whether you like it or not. Even today, Pakistan knows after Kargil that the international community is not going to support any adventure across the line of control. Okay? Right. So now the point is, how do you get something going?
And that's vis-a-vis Pakistan, and also vis-a-vis the people of Kashmir. There has to be.
So what I'm saying is, one of the things with Pakistan is that I'm not sure. The Pakistanis have also kept on changing. First, they wanted merger. First, they denied anything. In 1947, they said some tribals have come and we don't know, etc., etc. October 47, this happened. Only in May, they agreed that they were also involved. Okay. Then later on, first they sought merger. Then they started saying, no, we are looking for self-determination. See. Right. So now they say we are supporting the struggle politically. And diplomatically. So they're not. So I would think that basically something which would settle the border on the line of control, broadly at the line of control with Pakistan. And as far as the internal is concerned, I'm saying if they are citizens of India, if they are parts of the Republic of India, they must be treated with the laws of the Republic of India, and dealt with through a regime which upholds the law.
Dr. Joshi, wonderful talking to you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.